Should President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau be excommunicated? Welcome to the Kennedy Report. I'm Kennedy Hall. Now, I must give the caveat. We are not advocating one political party over the other. All of them are filled with snakes. However, we're Catholics, and we're looking at so-called Catholic politicians. This has been in the news recently with, as we're going to get to some clips here, the controversy surrounding Joe Biden and the bishops of the United States debating whether or not they should be able, well, priests should have the freedom to just say, no Holy Communion for you. We'll talk about why it's ridiculous this is even a debate. And the reason I'm bringing up excommunication, I want to have a context for this conversation. I'm not talking about my personal opinions about whether he's a meanie, therefore he shouldn't be able to go to Holy Communion. No. You see, someone who is going to Holy Communion is doing a public act of saying they are worthy to receive. Now, we know that we can't know the interior life of a person. I have no idea if my neighbor has gone to confession in the requisite manner to go to Holy Communion. And a lot of priests might not know that because, you can go to confession a lot of places, maybe you don't know who's in the confessional. It's just a basic judgment call. However, there are automatic excommunications in the church. And they're called latae sententiae penalties, which basically means the act itself excommunicates the person. It doesn't have to be declared. So if somebody commits one of these acts knowingly, they themselves are excommunicated. And here's a few examples. So for example, a person who throws away the consecrated Eucharistic species or takes and retains them for a sacrilegious purpose, that's actually an automatic excommunication. This is why Eucharistic ministers and communion on the hand can be such a problem. A person who uses physical force to harm the Pope, it's an automatic excommunication. A priest who absolves his accomplice in a sin against the commandment against adultery. So a priest cannot have a mistress on the side and absolve this person as part of it. That's not allowed. But here's one that's really important. A person who procures a completed abortion. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at the definition of procurement. This is how it's used in various ways, but in one sense, procurement is the act of obtaining goods or services, typically for business purposes. Also, procurement generally refers to the final act of purchasing, but it can also include the procurement process overall, which can be critically important for companies leading up to their final purchasing decision. This is a business example. But basically what this is trying to tell us is procurement can be specifically you yourself go pay the cash for the thing, but you can also be involved in the procurement process where you're going to reach this goal by giving the money or allocating the money or purchasing power for that thing in order to facilitate that this thing actually happens. So in the case of someone procuring an abortion in a specific setting, let's say with a couple who have found themselves outside of wedlock pregnant or something like that, well, it can be the doctor, it can be the nurses who work there, it can be the people in the office who are themselves making this happen. It can also be the boyfriend who pays the cash in order for it to happen. There's various ways that you can procure something. That word has a little bit loose. So I'm not suggesting I know how canonically we should apply this to a politician, but when we get to the point where politicians are actively promoting, saying they will sign for cash money to go to the procurement of abortion, I mean, we're asking ourselves, what's the difference between a hitman and the guy who pays to hire the hitman? Is there much of a difference between those two? I guess in some way, but the reality is this is a legitimate question to ask. Should these openly pro-abortion politicians be denied Holy Communion? Well, if they're automatically excommunicated, which there seems to be an argument for, or at least a potential for it, even if they don't go all the way and fit the stipulations for automatic excommunication, you'd have to talk to a good canon lawyer about that. It's still a severe public scandal where we know someone is at least in a state of mortal sin as they're persisting in something that directly goes against teachings of the church and even promotes that, which we even see here, an apostate from the faith or a heretic is automatically excommunicated. Now, that has to be formally proven, but you get my point here. We get in some pretty deep and murky, sinful waters, and if we're having public promotion of these things, I don't think it's a very hard argument to make that maybe we shouldn't contribute to this public scandal by saying to all Catholics, all 60 million or whatever are in the United States, it's okay to be like this and be Catholic, because then you're just telling people that they can mortally sin, and that's wrong. So let's get to this clip from, I believe, ABC News. We'll have a little bit of commentary talking about the Catholic bishops' debate on Biden's stance on abortion rights. Let's take a look.
President Biden, only the second Catholic commander-in-chief in history and arguably the most religiously observant since Jimmy Carter, now at the center of a debate among...
Sorry, I have to pause it there. I'm sorry. Arguably most religiously observant. This is a joke? Anyway, let's go on.
Debate among Catholic bishops over his stance on abortion rights. Some are questioning whether the openly devout president should be allowed to receive Holy Communion. Here's ABC's White House correspondent, Mary Alice Parks.
Openly devout. How is Joe Biden an openly devout president? Sure, he holds up rosaries in pictures. Okay. I've seen him on a late night talk show one time when the Pope was visiting America, talking about how he likes to go to Mass sometimes. If Joe Biden is openly devout, then Donald Trump was also openly devout, considering there's pictures of him with Bibles and things. Those things don't make someone openly devout. Someone who persists in public scandal and defies the teachings of the Catholic Church is not openly devout. Now, these are ABC commentators. I'm sure she's just reading a script and doesn't really know what she's talking about, but it gives you the milieu for this whole sort of thing.
President Biden this weekend at his hometown parish, where he attends Mass nearly every week. Only the second Catholic president in the nation's history after John F. Kennedy, President Biden even making time for worship while in England during his first foreign trip. Both president and parishioner, his personal faith now the center of a very public and heated debate among American Catholic bishops. Last week, during a virtual meeting, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops voting 3-1 to take steps that could one day allow priests to deny public figures like President Biden the sacrament.
3-1 American Conference of Bishops voting to take steps that could one day lead to denying figures like Joe Biden assistance at Holy Communion. Let's repeat that. Voting 3-1. Who was the quarter of bishops, by the way, that didn't think this was a good idea? But even in this seemingly overwhelming decision, which should be 100%, voting to one day, or voting to take measures that could one day, there's no urgency for souls here. Listen, we can make fun of Joe Biden all we want. But if we actually believe that his soul is in danger, this should be immediate. Every sacrilegious communion is a danger to one's soul.
Figures like President Biden the sacrament of communion over their support of abortion rights.
We've never had a situation like this where the executive is a Catholic president who's opposed to the teaching of the church.
The Vatican warning American bishops against the move. Pope Francis has publicly focused much more on issues of poverty, refugees, and equality.
That's also not true that we've never had this is from the Bishop of place in Oregon, where we've never had a president who basically openly denied the teachings of the church. Actually, John F. Kennedy, and I'm named after JFK, that's the name Kennedy, that was my parents chose that. He openly told a group of, I believe it was Baptists and stuff, that he would listen to the American Constitution over the teachings of the church if they came into conflict. That's actually rejection of the doctrines of the kingship of Christ. So this is not true.
60 Catholic Democrats on Capitol Hill rushing to President Biden's defense in a new letter to the bishops, including California Congressman Ted Lieu, who went as far as to call the bishops hypocrites, writing, "There are a number of Catholic Republican elected officials who support the death penalty. Are you going to deny communion to them?"
If you're watching this, I'm not sure if you know what the Babylon Bee is. It's a Christian satirical newspaper. It's so absurd, I'm starting to almost start to laugh. I'm not sure if this is real. It is apparently, though. Is there such thing as a Catholic Democrat? Is there such thing as a meat-eating vegan? And also, this politician says there are a number of Catholic GOP elected officials who support the death penalty. Are you going to deny communion to them? No, because you don't deny communion to Catholics who believe Catholicism. The death penalty is an acceptable position by the Catholic Church and has been for 20 centuries. The blind leading the blind, I guess. Let's continue.
The bishops are expected to vote on final language this fall. The president asked about their move and what it could mean for him.
That's a private matter, and I don't think that's going to happen. Thank you.
Okay, enough of Joe Biden. It's getting to the point now where I think I need a shower from watching all this. But they're going to vote in the fall. They're going to vote in the fall about something that might affect this man's immortal soul. And Joe Biden, again, he's like, what is he, 80 years old, whatever his age is? He might drop dead tomorrow. And they're going to wait months to find out whether or not they should stop him from committing sins that will lead himself to eternal damnation. There is nothing pastoral about this. I'm pleading, seriously. Whatever you might think about liberal politicians, he's got a soul. We don't want that soul to go to hell. This is nothing, we don't want this for anybody. Anyway, so it's not just Joe Biden, unfortunately, who is a famous Catholic politician, baptized Catholic. In my beloved nation of lumberjacks, beavers, and hockey fights, we also have a man who represents none of that, and his name is Justin Trudeau. And he has said more than once things that are a complete indictment against his Catholic faith of his childhood. He's very contradictory, like Joe Biden as well. You can see things of him saying, oh, I love the Bible, I used to read that growing up, and so on and so forth. He's become a very radical secularist and progressivist recently, leftist. And here's just one of the clips that we'll have commentary on, and it might actually be even harder to watch than the thing about Joe Biden. I apologize for that, but I promise we'll learn something.
No religious group is going to be barred from Canada's summer jobs on the basis of their beliefs, period. However, there are certain groups that are specifically dedicated to fighting abortion rights for women and inclusion of LGBT communities. And that is wrong. That is not something, that is certainly not something that the federal government should be funding.
So there are specific groups that don't support a woman's right to choose, not the women, not the female babies, by the way, but just the grown women. There are specific groups that don't support this, and they won't get any government money. Is he talking about the Catholic Church? There was actually a controversy with that if you look into what happened at this time. This was a policy going on a couple years ago. So, baptized Catholic, married in the Catholic Church in Ottawa, and basically says, sorry, seat of Peter, sorry, Church of the Apostles, if you don't support a woman's right to choose, no soup for you. Let's continue.
Should be funding summer students to roll back the clock on women's rights. That's not going to happen. This government will continue to be unequivocal. We will stand up for women's rights. We will defend women's rights and the rights of the LGBT community, regardless of what folks in certain religious groups try to push us against.
Why does anyone like this man? I'm actually wondering. It seems like he's doing an Oprah impression, but he's not even good at it. I can't understand. But certain religious groups are trying to roll back the clock. That's actually false. Abortion was around, Mr. Prime Minister, well before the Catholic Church. It's in the Old Testament, by the way. Rolling back the clock is what we do when we do the sacrificing of children. You want true progress for the rights of women, then stop killing their children.
You have organizations out there like the Center for Bioethical Reform that have been receiving thousands upon thousands of dollars of government money, of taxpayer money, to distribute hateful flyers of aborted fetuses to try and convince people to remove the right of a woman to control her reproductive choices. That is...
It's enough of him. Sorry, my blood pressure is getting too high. This Center for Bioethical Reform, I don't know if it's a Catholic organization. I've looked into it a little bit. It's one of many. But nonetheless, how is it hateful? How is it hateful to send or to put around flyers that show you the reality of what happens to a dismembered fetus, i.e. a small baby, in an abortion? You would have to hate the children to think that a picture of what happens to them when they're killed is hateful. Again, these politicians, yes, is it easy to make fun of them? Well, sure. Should they be barred from receiving Holy Communion? Well, in Americans, you guys still have a culture war. For all the flaws, you actually have a fight. Here, we don't really have a culture war. Justin Trudeau does not even pretend to be Catholic anymore. I think it was something he did advantageously about 7 or 8 years ago. He hasn't pretended in a long time. So it's not as if that conversation even comes up in the House of Commons. But these men have souls. I shudder at the thought of what my own private judgment will be like at the end of my life, as we all should, because we've all committed sins that are grave. But I cannot imagine what it would be like to stand before God and to say, I used your church. I used your church to justify the slaughter of innocents. I'm serious when I say this. Please pray for Justin Trudeau and please pray for Joe Biden, because very soon they will meet their maker, as we all will. And the wrath of God to this sort of thing will not be kind. And please pray for the people who are hypnotized by these charlatans, especially baptized Christians, that they can get to the point where they finally see the truth and stop supporting such a demonic and damnable evil enterprise. So now that I've forced you to watch clips of these wonderful speakers, I hope that you'll still watch the next video. If you have liked this video, please subscribe to this channel and like the video. Visit our website to see what we have going on to help you grow in your faith. Click the links in the description, and if you would, in your charity, please consider a donation. Again, pray for the souls of all these politicians. This has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, I'm Kennedy Hall, and God bless.
In Ottawa, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau has a message for anyone wanting to join his caucus. There's no choice but pro-choice. Only candidates that adopt his stance on abortion will pass the nomination process, a process he had promised would be open.